Hello, friends. I'm Huang Wing, a PhD student.
I'm Ishani Hetyachi and I'm a Sri Lankan born.
Welcome to I Scholar Dive with Huang and Ashani. This podcast series was created to be a support system for international scholars. In this monthly series, we interview professors, postdocs, student professionals of international background to share their stories, experiences, and advice with others in the community. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Duc Tran today. Duc and I connected through the Viet Bio group in San Diego, a community of Vietnamese biologists living and working in the area. Duc completed her undergraduate degree at Hanoi University and then came to the US to earn her PhD at Duke University. And afterwards, she returned to Vietnam to teach for a few years before coming back to work in the US, taking on multiple roles across academia and industry. Without further ado, let's turn the spotlight to Duc. Is there anything else you'd like to add to your introduction?
No, it's good. Thank you so much for the very kind introduction.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you again for joining with us. In this episode, we'll speak with an inspiring guest whose journey spans continents and career paths. We'll explore her insights into cultural adaptations, the contrast between working in the US and Vietnam, and the unique perspectives she has gained through her international and interdisciplinary experiences.
Okay, so could you share with us what first motivated you to come to the US for your studies?
Yeah, it was very simple in the beginning, actually, is that I just really wanted to go abroad. Growing up in Vietnam, I didn't have a lot of chances to go see other countries or lived anywhere else. The only country that I've ever set foot to was like Singapore, just because I had need to go there to take the GRE test. And then the other one is Thailand because it was close by and then we could go, on tour and stuff like that. So I was very inspired to go see the world. And then at the same time, when I was in undergraduate, a lot of my friends started leaving high school to study abroad or leaving their undergraduate program to go to all these countries like Singapore, Japan, somewhere in Europe, and in the US as well. So I was like so eager to just like go out there and pursue a study in something and just to see the world mainly. And that's why when I have an opportunity to go to study in the US, I seize it, immediately.
Okay, why do you have to go all the way to Singapore to get a GRE? Is it not offered in
Yeah.
Vietnam back then?
Yeah,
That was my
precisely.
question too. Like, is it
Yeah.
like also to go there or like you don't have
It
it in
was because it
Vietnam?
was a special GRE. It was a GRE subject test.
Oh, wow.
And it's not like the regular GRE. And in Vietnam, they didn't offer that. So I remember I had to book this budget. I think it was Tiger Airline or Tiger Airway because it was the only thing I can afford. And it was the first time I ever got on an airplane. I was so excited. And it was like really, really nice. The only thing is that it was a budget airline, so there was no food the whole way through. And I was like smelling somebody's instant noodles that they order on the airplane, and I was so poor I couldn't order anything. And I was like just vying for the day that I could order food on an airplane for myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
think
cool.
like one of the things that we usually talk about is how GRA can be costly for some countries and then
Yeah,
how it hinders the international students gain an
exactly.
education.
Yeah,
And then here you come here and tell us that you can't even take it in your country, which
exactly.
skyrocket the expenses.
Yeah, it's additional expense. Luckily, I had a friend who was studying in Singapore at the time, so I didn't have to pay for accommodation. So she took
That's
me to
good.
places there, and it just kind of opened my eyes to a whole new world that we are not like we have never known of. So it just like motivated me even more to go out there to the world.
That's cool. That's
Yeah.
that say a lot about your motivation to go abroad and study.
Yeah, it was really just like I want to travel the world.
Mm-hmm. Which GRE subject did you take in Singapore?
I think it was biochemistry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah,
Intense.
which later turned out to be my PhD program as well. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Did you also apply for a PhD program in Singapore, or you mostly just apply for US?
I think I actually applied to an undergraduate program in
Mm.
Singapore, actually. The friend who hosted me, we took the test together. So I
Mm.
don't know if you know, but in Vietnam, universities in Singapore will come over to Vietnam and offer this test.
Oh.
And they will organize this exam, and then students just come and register, and they will take the test all together. It's like a level A, like in the UK system, you have the level A and level O and stuff like that. So it's like a level A examination. So we took the test together, but she passed and she got picked, and then she went out to study in Singapore. And I didn't pass that one, so I continued my undergraduate at Hanoi University until I graduate, and then I later went on to do my PhD program instead of an undergraduate. Yeah.
So
Yep.
the system is very similar to what we have, which is also designed after the UK system, like O
Mhm.
level and A level.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so far away now. Yeah.
Yeah. Did your friend also pursue biochemistry afterward?
Actually, no. So she went to study biology
Mm.
at NTU, Nanyang Technology University.
Mhm.
And later she realized she was not into biology anymore. So she still graduated from the biology program, but then later she pursued a PhD in public health.
Oh, wow.
And now she's working in public health.
That's
Nice.
nice.
Yeah.
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 So I had like a pack, me and my two other friends who were also motivated by the same thing, like also wanted to go and travel the world together. So we always went out and hunt for scholarship. We were like hunting, literally hunting for scholarships so we can find programs that will allow us to study abroad.
Yeah, I remember those days when I was in undergrad. I also
Yeah,
went for a
yeah,
lot of
exactly,
scholarship.
right? It was
Yeah.
fun. It
Yeah,
was a
it's
lot
fun
of fun.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because like I saw the world as my oyster, you know? There are so
Mhm.
many opportunities and you just have to go out there and seize it.
Yeah. And then I feel like the progress of hunting for scholarship actually built your personality. Like when you start doing volunteer and then you start to realize how important this is, all the meaningful things coming out of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I made a lot of friends during this process too. Like we have a whole cohort. We would go to study, like we would have a group study so we can take the TOEFL. We can, and at the time they have like this new TOEFL test that you have to like talk to a machine.
Oh, wow.
Because before then, TOEFL doesn't have a speaking test like IELTS
Mhm.
because they don't have people, everything's computerized, right? So when we were taking the test, they came out with a computer-based speaking test. And now you have to speak the thing, so it's best if you can like practice with someone. And so we all get together, and especially the GRE also is the beast because of all of the vocabularies that you have to learn. You definitely need a group to study together. Yeah, and that's how we like meet people and build friendships and later like even go to the US together.
Do you
Yeah.
think it's actually help at all? Sometimes I feel like the vocab in GRE is very like not practical. I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's helpful if you read like the New York Times or something.
I see.
That was a time, like maybe back in 2016, I like followed all the news outlet about the election, talking about the election again. And I felt like a lot of the vocabularies that I learned in the GRE was used in those um news articles.
Hmm.
So, as a non-native English speaker, What kind of methods did you use to practice for the GRE English words other than reading the newspapers and working with your friends circle?
Yeah,
Because
actually, I
like
was
they're
reading.
not like very like everyday use English
Oh,
words, so
yeah. Not at all, but so I like to learn things very organically. So I at the time the Harry Potter books came out. And we were so excited to, every time a book come out, we would be like waiting and waiting so that it can. And then the English book came out always before the translated version, right? So we would get like pirated copies of the books from online as soon as it comes out. And then whenever I would read something and I find words in there, it would just like naturally go into my head. But the actual way that I study for the GRE is kind of traditional, like everyone. We would have flashcards, and then just go through it and over again to learn it by heart. And then try to write a sentence that has the word and make it an example or like read somewhere and then just do it repeatedly
so you
over and
get
over.
it in your mind. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I also grew up reading Harry Potter books, so
yeah.
I really like
Yeah.
the series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it helps. Like, and also for my speaking English, I like to watch a lot of American series. Friends is number one. Then I also watch How I Met Your Mother and Desperate Housewife. All of those things, it helps to for you to learn English organically without even trying. Like you're just having fun.
I just started watching How I Met Your Mother these
Yeah.
days. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I watched one episode in season one and then skip all the way to season 9.
Oh, I don't
No.
know if I watched the whole thing.
Oh wow.
It's just like too long.
Mhm.
But definitely Friends, I watched the entire thing. But still, like when they play back some of the clips, I was like, oh, I don't remember watching this. Yeah, because it just goes on for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you watch on Netflix or where did you watch it?
No, in Vietnam,
Maybe I
we
should
have
cut
this
out this part.
stores. Yeah, we have these stores that have, pirated DVDs. And then I would like buy the whole thing, like 10 season in
Wow.
DVD and watch at home. Yeah, we don't have cable TV. No. Yeah.
That's a lot of dedication.
Yeah.
Okay.
Righty. So what were some of the most surprising cultural differences you noticed when you first arrived in the US?
Yeah, so I think it's not that surprising. I kind of know about this already, but when I came here, it kind of hit me pretty hard. Is that everyone is so individual and so independent and so self-sufficient. So people don't ask other people for help in general,
Mhm.
and they just expect you to know what to do already. And when I first came, that makes me feel like not so welcomed.
Mhm.
So I mentioned I had a friend who went to Singapore. So when she went to her program in Singapore, there's like a whole group of Vietnamese students who already were there before her, and they organized like picking up and welcome them to the country and help them settle down. When you move to a new country, there's so many things that you have to do, right? For me, like I had to find accommodation, just setting up a phone line. Like I didn't have a car, I don't even know how to drive, how to get to places. And even like just to rent a house, you have to put down so much money. You have to put down deposit for everything. You have to put down deposit for electricity, water, phone bill, everything, because you have no credit history. So you build everything from scratch and everything you have to do on your own because everybody just expects you to know all these things already.
Mhm.
So that's my biggest culture shock is that it's a little bit like just throwing a fish into the water and expect it to be able to thrive. And eventually, I get used to it. But later, I realized how much of a hard time I had at the beginning. So I tried to help the students who came after me because I understand how hard it is in the beginning, just to do very simple things like getting a phone line to call your parents or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
Yeah. I'm surprised that the international office at your university doesn't offer much help in that
yeah,
sense.
yeah, I mean, they did help, like some major things. Like, for
Mm-hmm.
example, they have a shuttle to
Mm-hmm.
take students to the Social Security office to apply for a Social Security number, some major things. But at the time, I don't think I received as much help. I have to reach out to my department to ask them if there's somebody who can pick me up from the airport,
Oh.
and a student volunteer to pick me up from the airport, and that was nice. But everybody's just kind of, but the thing is, in America, if you want anything, you need to ask for it. If you don't ask, then everybody expects you to be self-sufficient and do whatever you need to do. So they wouldn't offer because they are sufficient, so they expect that you will be too.
So that's great. What inspired you to go back to Vietnam to teach after your studies?
Yeah, so I always wanted to go back to Vietnam and become a professor. It's probably because I always admired my professors at my university. I thought that they were doing like really cool work, and I wanted to be like them, not just to teach, but also like do research and just be a faculty member, just like here in the US, if you are like a principal investigator, right? So that's why when I first came to the US, my professor asked me, what you want to do after graduate school? I told him I wanted to go back to Vietnam and become a professor. And that's what I did. Not quite a professor yet. It was more like the title is a lecturer, but it will be an equivalent of an assistant professor position here in the US.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Again, it's very similar to my home country, like the lecturer, senior lecturer,
Mm. Yeah.
demonstrator. So those are the
Yeah.
rank.
I
Yeah.
really don't like that nomenclature because it implies that you just teach, whereas you are required, actually, you are obligated to do research.
Yeah, I think it's just the British English term. It's the same thing as the professor here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All
And
right. So this is an interesting question. So like how did your time in the US influenced in your teaching techniques and methods and the approach in Vietnam? Were they similar or like did you had like differences?
a lot of differences because I did my undergraduate in Vietnam, and I later came back, but I taught in a university that used entirely English. So the number one influence of my study in the US to my teaching or my style in Vietnam is that everything I learned in the US is in English. So it's very hard for me to convert back to Vietnam and to Vietnamese. So I chose a program exclusively in English so that I can teach everything I know in English there. And then also the school choose to use entirely English textbooks. So that really helps me. It's very inspiring. When I went to school in undergraduate in Vietnam, we read entirely Vietnamese textbooks that were written by our professors and have terrible, terrible illustrations on the book. All like no color, so uninspiring. And I remember my first time that I downloaded the book Biology by Campbell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so good that I read like the entire thing in like 2 weeks. Because it
Very
was just so
colorful.
good. Just like look at those pictures in colors and real, and all these interesting stories that have never been written in my own textbooks. So I like to try to incorporate these things into my classrooms. I didn't want to use any of the traditional textbook that Vietnamese students usually use. And I like to teach them the concept using English because all the terminology that have been translated to Vietnamese all originated from English. So it's much better for them if they just learn the original version.
Okay, I was wondering if there's any knowledge gap between the Vietnamese textbooks and the English textbook that you apply in your classroom.
Yeah, actually, a lot, especially in terms of scientific methodology. I remember when I first came to the US and then because we went to a graduate program. So the first thing that we do is usually they have like a few paper reading classes, you know. They will give you some papers and then you will have to present it. And when I read this paper was like the first time I ever read these papers, really, because another hurdle that you do in Vietnam is that all the journals are so expensive and they need subscription. And being a poor Vietnamese student, I would never, dream of having the subscription to like buy an article from Nature or Science or whatever, right? So when we studied there were techniques like FRET, the fluorescent activated, to measure the interactions and how close molecules are to each other. I never heard of that. In my studies, we learn a lot about the components of the cells, and we study over and over again the structure of DNA, like the helical structure and stuff like that. And it's just repeated over and over again in every classes, whereas we never learn the other things, like all this new, advanced technology. We just study what the knowledge is, but we don't study how the people come up with that knowledge. But all of these are explained in, biology textbooks. Not everything, but I really like how the approach that they explain how they get to the concepts or the ideas or the structure of this and that they teach in the textbook instead of just memorizing it, like in the Vietnamese textbook. Yeah.
I have two follow-up questions. One is that you mentioned you didn't have access to the journal. So, not the Vietnamese universities offer any of those as a part of the undergraduate program?
Not at all.
Not at all. Okay.
When I went to school, I don't know what it is now. And also when I taught at international university, I don't think we had access to any of those.
Okay.
So we were required to publish, but
You
don't
don't
really
have
have
access.
access.
Okay.
No.
So the
Yeah.
other one is that you mentioned that the textbooks are not the normal standard ones that like we use here in the US or even in my home country. I think we use the same textbooks as we use here.
Yeah.
So, and then you notice this knowledge gap between the
Mhm.
Vietnamese textbooks and the ones that we use here.
Mhm.
So, are you required to take any of the standardized tests like ACS sort of test that would bring you to a one world standard? And if there is one of those exams, do you think that the Vietnamese students are at a disadvantage because they don't have the access to all the
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So the GRE subject test that I was talking to you about in the beginning, I didn't do that well on that test. Yeah,
yeah.
I spent a lot of money on that. But, when I read, most of the questions are kind of experiment based also. It would be like student A is performing this experiment and he got this and this result. What is your interpretation? And that's entirely different from what we learned. What we learned in our program when I went to undergraduate school is to memorize a lot of things. Memorize what are the organelles in the cells, describe what they are, how they function, memorize this life cycle of this mushroom. or something like that. A lot of it I don't even remember anymore. Like what do we even study the life cycle of mushroom for?
There's a lot of things we learn in school that not practical.
Yeah, I remember there was a whole class about classification of vegetables or something, not vegetable, like plants and vegetations.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you have to learn how they are named, why they're named that way. And yeah, I don't know why we have to study that.
I feel like below graduate school level is there's a lot of memorization
Exactly.
in
Yeah.
biology, biochemistry, yeah, except chemistry or math. So then
Did you
that's
do your undergraduate here or in Vietnam?
here. Yeah. Well, actually, I did my undergrad in Vietnam for 1 year, but I was majoring in foreign trade and not anything science related.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So after I moved here, I switched to science
Mm-hmm.
and then I continued that path. And then again, yeah, I totally relate to when you talk about how we don't know a lot about the Vietnamese term of the science terms. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So you cannot teach because, you don't even know what the terms are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So were there any challenges you faced transitioning from being a student in US to teaching in Vietnam?
Yeah. So this is a major challenge and not unique to me. A lot of people faces this challenge. So when I went to the US to study, I was just a student. I have never worked before. So a lot of people took a few years to work here and there before they actually go and study abroad. But I like fresh out of undergraduate school and went straight to graduate school in the US. So I was not really trained in teaching at all, right? In graduate school, you are trained to give presentation, right? About your work, your dissertation, everything. You're not trained to teach. But when I went to international university and I gave my interview panel a sample of a lecture that I would give. And my feedback was, so remember, this is a class and not a presentation. So it's very different. And when I actually went to class and started teaching student, I realized that it's very, very different when you teach and you prepare your lesson plan compared to when you make a presentation for when you give a seminar or something, right? So you have to focus on the main points. You cannot cover everything in the textbook because students, they don't have the ability to absorb all of that knowledge all at once. Um, your job more like to engage them so that they understand the main points, to kind of equip them with the main materials and to inspire them to then go and find the materials and learn more on their own. So that's the more difficult thing that I was totally unequipped for and I knew nothing about. And then it just got better with experience later. Nobody teach you in school this kind of thing. Maybe in like school where they actually train teachers, they do those techniques, but we were just studying to be a PhD. Like we didn't learn anything about teaching education. So that was one of the challenge. The other challenge that I have is I also wanted to be a faculty member and be a principal investigator. But the biggest challenge in Vietnam is to obtain funding to fund your lab. It's so, so, so difficult to establish a new lab as a brand new faculty member because you don't have seed money. So here in the US, if you are accepted for a position, a faculty position, you get an amount of seed money so that you can establish your lab, you can hire people, you can buy equipment, buy reagents, so you can start with something. There's none of that
Wow.
in Vietnam, completely zero. So you start with like an empty hand, you have nothing in your hands to start with. So you literally have to go out there and find any little bit of money that you can, and everything has a string attached. So one of the most rising popular funding grant that currently in Vietnam is called NAV-FOSTED. So this one is designed so that to encourage young people like us to come back, and we can apply for it and we can get the money. But the string is that after you get this money, you have like about 2 years or something to do the research that you propose in your application, and you have to publish 2 papers that are in the Q1. I don't know if you know this, but they divide all the journals into 4 quadrants. So the top 25% of the journals with the highest impact, they call the Q1 journal. And after you finish this grant and you use up all the money, you have to publish 2 papers in one of these Q1 journals. And you know about research, you propose something, you do it, you may or may not get the result you want. How can you even promise that, And if you don't deliver, you have to pay back the money.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's so difficult.
Very risky.
Yeah, especially for me because I was so inexperienced. I knew nobody in Vietnam. A lot of people who have worked in Vietnam before, they have connections, so they know this and they know that. At least they know like kind of a pathway to get money from here and there. But I didn't have anything, so I was very inexperienced. So that's like a major challenge that eventually I couldn't pass. And also one of the reasons leading me back to the US.
Mm.
Yeah.
So when you say Q1 journal, is the journal ranking in Vietnam similar to internationally or the US, or is different?
So
Like,
they try to use, this is also brand new to me when I came to Vietnam because I had no idea what it is. So people told me there was this website called Sai Mago. Do you know about that?
I'm not gonna.
You see, same feeling when I was there, and I just look it up, and Scimago is the one that they use. They have like a ranking system for all of the journals with their impact factors and stuff like that. Different types of impact factors. And so they will group the journals into the different types of quadrants. And the higher quadrants that you are, the better quality and the better. So they have a scoring system for your journal that is published, whether it's Q1 journal or Q2 journal and stuff like that. So you have different points. You have higher points if you go to a Q1 and less point if you go to the other ones.
Yeah, I think in the US we use the nature indices and some other Web of Science sort of. I got to know about it. So like during my green card application, I noticed that the lawyers had written down like something that talks about the top 25% journals according to nature indices, something like that. So I
Yeah,
think we
yeah.
use like our own thing here.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
here in the US, I think most people just go by experience, right? In different fields, they will have different journals that they always go to.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, like organic chemistry, they always go to JAX. Regular biology folks like us, we like to go to Nature, sometimes Science and Cell, that kind of thing. So
Yeah,
we don't
because
really
we have
care
these
what.
scope-based journals that everyone likes for their field. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why it was so foreign to me when I came back to Vietnam and they, gave me all these metrics. And I was like, wow, what have I been studying?
Must be tough navigating the system on your own.
Twice,
Actually,
here and there.
yeah, it wasn't that bad. But then there were a lot of dilemma, like just unfairness in the systems. So one of the responsibility of being a faculty is that you have to publish 1 point of publication per year. And having no money to start your lab, so they give you a 1 year kind of a waiting period. So it's for the first year, you don't have to publish 1 point, but then starting from the second year, you have to publish 1 point a year. and 1 point doesn't mean one paper. 1 point
I was
means,
going to ask you, what's the 1 point mean?
yeah, it's like very interesting. Okay, so 1 point means, so if you publish a sole author and you are the only author of that paper, then you get a whole 1 point. But
Oh.
nobody published sole author, right? In like
That's
you
very
probably have
interesting
like
because
30
when you
authors
have
in the
like
paper.
that, it
Yeah,
usually you don't have collaborators, and then
yeah,
it's kind
yeah.
of
So
not
nobody does
valuable.
that. So you cannot get 1 point with one paper. So if you publish and you are first author, then you get 0.7 point.
Oh.
Yeah, and then if you are the second author, then you get a first author or you a corresponding author, then you 0.7 point. But if you're second author, then you 0.5 point. If you're third and onward, you'll be 0.3 divided by the number of authors.
Oh.
So so it just get like that, and then that's why you have to publish even more paper, and it just gets impossible. And in the end, I decided that I just gonna publish a review paper because I have no data to work with. So just based on reading a lot of papers, and I just put together one, and then I did a sole author myself. But that's like just to make up for the point requirement. Is not because I wanted to do that. I wanted to do experiment collecting data so I can actually publish a research paper. But I have to spend time to do all the other things because it's required by the university. And hear this, if you don't publish 1 point, they will convert the 1 point into how many hours that you teach. And then they will deduct that from the amount of hours you teach from your salary.
Oh my gosh.
Yes,
Oh,
Oh my God. No
literally
wonder.
getting back the salary they pay you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
No wonder.
no wonder you
it's
wanted to
so
come back to
difficult.
US.
Yes, it is so unwelcoming, and they keep saying that they want to welcome the talent, they want to bring back the people, but when the people like me came back, it was so unwelcomed. It was so tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, are you okay
Like,
with me publishing this? Because
I
we
guess
have a
so. I don't
friend.
know. Maybe
Okay.
raising awareness.
Yeah, because
Already kind of new. Hopefully the system is better now, but that was what I experienced
I
when
can't
I came back.
imagine the mental health toll that someone would have with all this pressure to,
Burden.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like publish and like do all these things and get these points and all sort of
Yeah.
things.
What I feel most bad for is the students. So they look up to us. They think that just like me, when I was a student in university, I just look at my professor and I admired them so much. I looked up to them. And when I came back to be lecturer, my students looked up to me and they believed so much in me. Whereas I felt like I don't have the power to be against the system and to bring them all these opportunities that they thought that I would give them. So I feel really bad for the student, but they're actually the most inspiring part of being a faculty member in Vietnam.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know I didn't know much about the academia system in Vietnam. No wonder.
That's very interesting to know,
Oh,
actually.
there are even more stories, but we probably don't want to publish that. So
Yeah. This
Okay,
interview gonna
so
last more than 1 hour.
how did your experience in teaching Vietnam shape the way you approach the things in the US now that you have moved back to US?
Yeah, I actually was very grateful for my experience to teach in Vietnam because I was able to improve a lot on my scientific communication. So before, I was so comfortable with just, presenting what I know to people without knowing if the people is receiving all this information, right? And then when I went back to Vietnam and I teach, and then I realized that not everybody's understanding the same way. So I have to improve my scientific communication in a way so that people understand my work. When they understand my work, then they will be able to appreciate my work and they will value my work and I will get paid for my work. Right? So that's like the number one positive thing that I get from my experience teaching in Vietnam is, getting way much better at scientific communication.
So I forgot to ask earlier, but when you said when you teach, you need to engage the student. So
Mhm.
what method did you use to engage the student when they got distracted?
Well, I think I like to include, like, because this is what I enjoyed when I was reading the textbooks in English, is that there are some interesting stories, like some anecdotes, some interesting this and that. So you can include that. I also like to use video, a little snippet of video in the beginning to basically wake them up and make them pay attention. Sometimes I would have like a quiz, maybe a quiz it will be unannounced usually in the beginning or in the middle or at the end. So they will get this extra points for doing the quiz. So they should be on alert most of the time so that they can pay attention and then be present for the quiz because some students just don't show up.
That's true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm asking because in one of my biochemistry class, the professor is really animated. She will talk about the biochemistry pathway, and then you know how like she will use her body and her hand and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, and try to make this very animation, and sometimes it looks
Mm-hmm.
funny, but I guess
Mm-hmm.
that's how she engaged the student.
Yeah, yeah, because sometimes they just get sleepy because they're busy. They go to all these classes and learn all this information. It it gets overwhelmed for
Yeah.
them. So they get sleepy and they will just drift off somewhere
Yeah,
once in a
especially
while.
biochemistry. There's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I had like the best sleep in my advanced calculus class when I was in undergraduate school. It was like the best ever. Yeah, could never get that back.
Okay. How has your perspective on work and education changed through these cross-cultural experience?
So I think my perspective maybe have not changed that much, but maybe it's just being shaped by my own experience. So remember in the beginning, I always wanted to be a professor and go back to Vietnam, and that's what I did. I went back to Vietnam, but then I was hit by reality. So what I experienced then moved me back to the US. But then I realized that really my core interest has not changed. So I always wanted to be involved in scientific research. I like to be by the bench doing, wet lab, stuff like that. I haven't been tired of it. So, when I went back to Vietnam, I also wanted to be a principal investigator and have my own lab and everything. But, it was so difficult that I couldn't make that happen. So I decided to go back to the US and then I became a postdoc and stay in academia. Then I realized that academia is not for me. And then I decided that I'm going to go to the industry, a pharmaceutical industry, and actually involved in the research for the drug discovery process. So it's always the same core interest is that I want to be involved in scientific research that drives the drug discovery. So it really doesn't matter to me whether I do it in an academic setting or I do it in an industry setting. So even though my perspective slowly change, but I think my core belief is still there.
Have you ever got bored of doing the same type of research over and over, or do you always try to get to change it somehow?
Oh, of course. When I was going through my PhD program, so I was trying to develop this mass spectrometry based methodology to profile protein stability in large scale. So it was a method development. So you have to do the one thing over and over again with like little change from one to another. So at some point, in my 5th year. I was so tired of it. And I see the end of the tunnel. I see that it's dead end. I see that my research is so insignificant and it cannot be applicable to many things. So I felt like I have no interest in doing that anymore. And luckily, I accumulated enough data so that I could graduate. But then I realized that I still want to stay in research. And at the time, I didn't know if I want to go to the industry or I want to be a faculty member, because in the beginning, I wanted to be a faculty member. So I decided to do a postdoc, and then I will have more time to figure out what I want to do. Excuse me. And then by that time, I lost all of my motivation. I literally had no interest in research anymore. But then I had to force myself when I contacted all of this guy to apply for postdoc positions. I had to pretend like I really like their research and their science, right? I had to force myself to write all these words like, oh, I'm interested in so and so. I'm really fascinated by your work on this and that. And I felt like lying to myself. I felt really bad. But then when I went to my next lab, the research there is so different from the ones that I did in my graduate school. And I learned so many new things that it just came back to me. But when I was in grad school, I really lost it. Like by my 5th year, I really did lose it. But because I forced myself to do these things, that eventually I stuck with it.
So I guess advice for listener is if you lost your interest, don't worry. Someday you'll find it back.
Yeah, someday you'll find it back. And also, just expose yourself to things that you have never done before. Yeah, like switch your areas of research. You don't have to do the same thing over and over again. It's very interdisciplinary now.
Yeah. So how did you find the postdoc position that makes sure that you learn something new, but also like something in your comfort zone that you have something to advertise, right? Advertise yourself that, oh, I have these skills that I can apply, I can contribute to your lab. Also, I can learn something new.
Yeah. So when I studied, it was mass spectrometry-based proteomics. That was my expertise. And in my first postdoc, I actually did directed protein evolution. So I wrote in my cover letter to all of my application that I want to learn more about molecular biology. I want to do all of these other things, not just mass spec, because I know that even though it's a powerful tool, but it's limited in many different ways. Molecular biology is another powerful tool. So if I can combine the two, I think I can do many cool research. So that's literally what I wrote in my cover letter. It doesn't resonate with everybody, but it resonates with some people who have labs that are already interdisciplinary. So they will have groups that have different things, and they like people who wants to do different things like this. So how I found it is I would make a list of all the university I want to work at after my graduation, mostly based on geographical. I literally just want to work in California. After I graduated from North Carolina, I just wanted to move to California. And I found all the university in California and all the big ones. And I found all the departments that are relevant. And I found all the PIs there that have research that I like in those departments. And I make a list of all of them. And I also consulted my advisor. He knew some people from that list, and he would tell me like, yeah, you want to work with this guy, you don't want to work with that guy. Oh, be careful with this. This guy's a great person. So that helped me narrow down the list. And I also went to the NIH report. I think you are aware of that. So they list all the people that receive funding from NIH. I will look them up by their name and see if they have like maybe a 3 or 4 years funding in the future. If people don't have funding, then I don't contact them.
I see.
So I would make this list and narrow down all the people that my advisor like and people that have funding. Then I just send out email to them to see if they have postdoc positions available. And I also include a cover letter to tell them, this is my intention. I want to do this and that. And eventually I found my postdoc advisor. Apparently he graduated from Duke from an undergraduate program. And then he started out a few years back at Scripps, Florida. And, my cover letter really resonated with him. And so I also interviewed in a few other places as well, but I really liked his lab and the people there. So that's why I decided to go to his lab.
That's nice.
Okay, so looking back, what would you say was the most defining moment in your journey?
Yeah, I think the best defining moment in my journey is when I received the Vietnam Education Foundation scholarship. It literally changed my life. So when I applied for this scholarship, it was a 2-year long process. So I started out as a second-year student, and by the time I finished, I graduated the university, and at that same time, I got the word that I get the scholarship to go study abroad. So it was a 2-year pursuit. It was so fulfilling when I got that scholarship and knew that I will be fine over there. Because a lot of my friends, they get partial scholarship and they had to get part-time job to cover their expenses and stuff like that. And so when I had this scholarship and I had the opportunity to go to America to study, it was the most defining moment and the proudest moment because it was tough. It was a 2-year long process. And I don't know how many they received, but in every year, there are only 40 students that were selected and from different fields. So you have to compete with a lot of people in order to get to the end. And it literally opened the door to me. And I don't know where I ended up with if I didn't get that scholarship. So that was probably the most defining moment in my career.
So how was the process to apply and get the scholarship? Like, what do you have to do?
Yeah. So let me remember because it was so long.
It's okay.
Yeah. So first, I think you have to just put in your application, your transcript, and I think they have another test for English called the TOEIC or something. So it's a cheaper version of TOEFL. So you just take that test and then you can, tell them that you have some literacy in English. So that's the first round. And then in the second round is the subject test. So this subject test, I think they actually have ETS organize that for them. So different students from different field will have different subject tests. So I took the biology one. So I actually studied the Campbell textbook for that test.
Wow.
And it actually spot on. It was like pretty good book for that test by the ETS. Forgot what the test name is, but not GRE. And then after you pass that, then you go to the interview round. So the interview round, they will have professors from US universities that form a panel depending on the subject of the student. So they will have different panels for different students. So for the life sciences, they have one panel and they will interview all the students. There were like 4 people in that panel, and you will come in and they will ask you questions and you will answer, kind of having a discussion. And then in the end, they will decide who will move forward with that process. And the last round is you apply yourself. So these professors that interviewed you, they will give you recommendation letter. And they will also recommend to you, oh, based on your interests, I think you should go to this and this and this schools. You should apply to this and this programs. So they give you some suggestion, and you also look up, they also give you the NUS a US News ranking for the different program to help you choose. So I chose about 9 schools because the application fee is crazy too.
Yeah. I think like 100
Very
something
expensive.
per school.
Yeah, so I chose 9 schools because that's what I can afford at the time.
That's a lot in Vietnamese
Yeah,
currency,
yeah,
$900.
I
Also,
know.
I don't know
Um,
about for you, but then sometimes if you apply early, you can apply for waiver of the
I
fee.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
some
So
of the schools, not all, I think.
not all of them,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't think I get any waiver from them. So that VEF program, they also have this person to help edit your SOP, your statement of purpose. So that's really helpful too. So you are equipped with a recommendation letter from one of these US professors, and some of them are from the National Academy of Science. So
Wow.
very well-renowned professors. And then you also get this editor that will help you with your SOP. And then they also pay for you to take the GRE. So that's how I took my GRE there. They pay for us to get our GRE. And so with all of these things, we apply ourselves. And then once you get an admission to one of the schools, then it's official that you're going to be funded by this VEF Foundation to go study abroad.
Oh,
But actually, what they provide is not that much. In the end, they only provide funding for the first 2 years of the graduate program. And then the last 2 to 3 or 4 years, your advisor has to pay for you.
I see.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
Do they
Yeah.
ask you to return to Vietnam afterwards?
Yes. So that's part of the reason why I went back to Vietnam also, is that there is a 2-year rule requirement because this VEF program is a government funded program. So we all got the J1 visa, and we all have the 2-year rule written on our visa, is that after the completion of the program, then you have to go back to Vietnam and stay there for at least 2 years before you can come back to the US.
I see.
Yeah.
That you can break the bond, basically like paying them back some amount, or do you have to go back?
For us, we couldn't pay back because it was a foundation created by the US government, actually, to provide funding for Vietnamese students to come to the US to study. And they have a limited amount of funding, and they finish in 2016. So by 2016 or 18, they ran out of money and they closed down the foundation. So even if you want to return the money, there's no one to return to. Yeah, so they just disperse everything. And then actually some of my friends later apply for the waiver. I don't know what the waiver is called, but they apply for the waiver through the embassy or something so that they can still stay in the US. But for me, I just like wanted to go back to become a faculty member anyway. So I went back, you know.
Okay. How do you see your career and personal path evolving from here?
Yeah. So, in the beginning, when I first moved to the industry, I thought that I really liked staying at the bench. I like to do wet lab and do scientific research like always. But now I realize that I don't have to be staying at the bench to be involved in scientific research. I can still be involved in that whole research and development process without staying at the bench. So I'm now more open to pursue maybe a more management role. So yeah, so that's probably where my career is gonna progress. That's probably the direction, is maybe going up in the management role. But for now, I'm still pretty comfortable with my kind of wet lab position, staying close at the bench. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I kind of relate to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Before I got my current position as a research scientist, I
Mm-hmm.
was also like so hardcore that I want to stay in the bench. I want to do
Mm-hmm.
the research by myself, and that's
Yeah.
what I really like.
Yeah.
But now that I work with the students and the other researchers, and
Mm-hmm.
I get involved with their research more
Mm-hmm.
than I did before,
Mm-hmm.
not doing the research
Yeah,
actively, like mentoring and managing. And
exactly. Yeah.
that's very interesting and that's
Yeah.
really enjoyable. Yeah,
Yeah, actually you can get even more things done because
exactly. Yeah,
like if in terms of wet lab, they may be better than you.
yeah.
You know,
It's
they may
very,
be,
it's a new skill set actually.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, to provide your insights, to inspire people to do
exactly.
things and to
Yeah.
delegate the task to people is entirely different skill set. And
Mm.
actually it is this kind of a threshold for a lot of scientists in the industry is going from this scientist position to a management role is is a threshold. So you have to find your opportunity somewhere so you can make that jump from just a scientist alone to having other scientists working for you.
Is that the principal scientist or senior scientist level that you're talking about, or is there a different
So
one?
senior scientists, you still work at the bench.
Like project manager, sort of.
Yeah, project manager is a different thing, but I was seeing my path in industry as eventually becoming a principal scientist. So a principal scientist is very much like a PI, but you don't have anybody to manage. That's in most of the companies. So you will be very senior. You get higher salary than a senior scientist, actually the highest salary that you can get as a scientist for most company, but other companies, they call it different things. So in general, principal scientist is the highest you can go, and you can stay there for a long time. You can just be there and do the same work over and over again, and you don't have to manage anyone. But in some companies, principal scientists also get some research associate to work with them. But in some companies, you are still your own entity and you don't have to manage anyone. But then if you want to get to a manager position, then you can get to associate director, and then you can go to director position and senior director. So you can also be project lead, and that's the kind of like going up. Project manager doesn't have to be a PhD. So it's more management and administrative role, really. So you just basically go to all of these teams, you assemble all these teams together to tackle a project, and you make sure that the project progress, and you keep track of the progress, and you report to higher ups, right? So you don't have to do the research, you don't have to think about how you make this product happen or something. The team leaders will do that. But you have to make sure that the team leaders are productive. You have to make sure that this team is productive. If this team is not productive, then you have to do some sort of organization in order to make them productive. So they don't really need to be involved in the science. They keep track of the science, but they don't make the decision when it came to science. Sorry, is what I mean. Yeah. Yeah, but it's not easy. I learned that it's not easy to transition from like a purely academic role to a project management. You can go from there because it's not like a critical role in many companies. So if company want to downsize and they want to reduce the workforce, project management or project manager usually is the first one to go because they just need the people who make the products. They don't need the people like middle management, right? So it's a nice role. You can work from home, you can work remotely, you don't have to do bench work. You do mostly, you work with like Smart Sheet and Gantt chart, make sure everybody's on time, on schedule. You coordinate with CRO here and there, but you don't really do any of the real science. It's hard to find. Not every company has such a position, and easy to let go. But you do make a lot of money too.
Okay. So finally, if you could share one piece of advice for listeners about adapting to new cultures and environment, what would that be?
Okay, yeah, I think probably reaching out to people, try to get a lot of good people on your side, and because the human resources is an amazing resource. So if you can reach out to your network or build your network and have them, help you in any way, that will be very, very powerful. Because, just functioning alone is not as powerful as having many hands to help you. And on the other side of that is to be always appreciative of the help that you receive. Always acknowledge and credit the people who help you religiously. Don't forget their help. Don't forget how kind they are to you. And you can, slowly build from that. People will remember, and your network is the most powerful thing. So that's what I think probably is the key of success for a lot of people.
Okay, with that, thank you, Dr. Duc, a lot for agreeing to be our guest speaker today.
Yeah, thank you for inviting. I had a great time.
Yeah, a lot of new information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for staying with us for another episode of iScholar Dive. If you liked it, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and if you are not already doing so, please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. iScholar Dive with Huang and Ishani. Please leave us a comment with your suggestions or the topics you want us to discuss in the future. If you want to share your iScholar story, please let us know by emailing us at ischolardive@gmail.com or sending us a message. We hope to have you again with our next episode on the first Thursday of the month. iScholar Dive content is separate from Huang's and my research roles at UC San Diego.